So would you say that having gone to the school, it's changed what you thought your career path would be?
No, I came to the School of Information with the goal of doing a startup after I graduated here in Silicon Valley, and that's exactly what I'm doing. But I just think the School of Information gave me, the right tools, and it prepared me better to do what I'm doing today.
Got it. Do you have a comparison of any other information schools? I know there's a few others on how it might differ. We wouldn't put that on a video so much as it's good for us to know,
Mhm.
say versus Stanford or the University of Washington, or I know there's a few other.
There is a School of Information in the University of Washington. There is one in the University of Michigan, but to be honest, I haven't spent too much time. I have met a couple of students when I was at the University of Washington from that department, but I think even there is a variation in how individual universities interpret what a School of Information should be. To be honest, if you ask me, that's just an exercise in branding, right? So all the schools of information want to get under a common umbrella so that there is more recognition for that type of school, but I don't know how similar they are in terms of the syllabus and the research focus and what they do. So
Did you find it an advantage to be in the Bay Area? I mean, did that come true to be a positive?
absolutely, like I said, before I came to the Bay Area, one of my goals was to do my own startup, and it was either a university in the Bay Area or nothing at all. And one of the reasons I chose to come to Berkeley even was that I would get to be a part of the startup ecosystem in the community over here, and that was very important to me. And I wouldn't even have considered going anywhere else. I would have just stayed back in India, and I came to Berkeley, and that has really helped me, realize that goal of doing my own startup in the Bay Area, and that's what I'm doing now.
And there's life beyond just school. I mean, you did have a life outside of school every day you can talk about. I mean, life in Berkeley wasn't so bad.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you did have some fun.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
So, uh, talking about life outside school, I think I would be a bad person to answer too many questions about that, because in general I'm a boring person who just works all the time, and that's what I've been doing. If it was not work for school, it was work for startup, or the job I had outside school, or the research assistant position that I had on campus. So there was always something to do. But of course, it's a new country, and I did try to do my bit in terms of just going around the Bay Area and being a tourist and all that. But I haven't even done a lot of that, and I came here with a goal, and I'm just I really love and enjoy what I do. So that's what I've been focusing on for now, but maybe in the future.
so just real quick, just like town, weather, life. I mean, you did leave the apartment.
Yeah.
Right. So you got a sense of what went on outside of it. So for someone who's thinking about it or wants to come here and never been, I mean, I mean, it's not cold. It's
Oh yeah, I've heard in terms of the experience of the area itself, Berkeley and the Bay Area. I've heard other classmates, for example, who come from other parts of the US or Europe. They really love the weather, right? And I'm from Bangalore, tropical climate. Sometimes I thought Berkeley was cold, so again, in terms of the experience, it is very close to home for me, because Bangalore and South India in particular has the weather is similar to what it is in the Bay Area, and in that respect, my brother lives in Chicago, so I've been there a couple of times, and my God, you should just come to the Bay Area it in the winter anytime. I think it's a great place to be, so I don't have any complaints about that.
But you met people from all over the world, really, at the high school, or is it a lot of It's a lot of Americans.
At the high school, there are a lot of Americans. There are a bunch of Indians. There were a few people. For example, a good friend was from Switzerland, Germany, and Indians. Obviously, a number of people from all over America. So, in general, I think you would see that on campus, engineering and the hard sciences have a big representation from India, Asia, China, those regions. And the School of Information, in that regard, I don't know, it's not that leaning towards the hard sciences in terms of what the student body is made up of. But in general there is diversity even geographically, not just in terms of your background educationally.
Do you think that most people that come from India or Europe tend to stay, or Asia tend to stay here then, or do you think they go back?
Well, that depends. Professor Vivek Wadhwa, who's a visiting scholar at the School of Information, has done, along with the Dean Annalie Saxenian, a bunch of research on that very topic, and who stays back and who goes back to their home country and works over there. In general, I think it really depends. It's an individual decision. I know for a fact that a lot of people these days going back to India especially is definitely an option, because there are lots of opportunities there. Even when I was working in India, some of my colleagues studied here, got a PhD here, and came back to India and worked, because there are, if I can work in Google over here in Mountain View, you can work in Google back in Bangalore in India, because they have an equally vibrant office and opportunity over there, and that's true for lots of other companies. So in general, over the last decade or two, I absolutely think that the opportunities and the motivation to go back home, that has gone up by quite a bit. Maybe that was not the case 30 or 40 years ago, where there were no opportunities in India and this was like the land of opportunity, but that is definitely changing, and over time I think probably that will only keep increasing. And even at this point in time, my goal is not to stay here permanently. I just have some goals of doing a startup in Silicon Valley and going through that experience, and probably once all of that is done, I'll go back too. So I don't really know at this point.
Okay, I have one last question then we'll let you. Do you have any tips that you could give us personally for putting on their, or redoing stuff on their Facebook page for the iSchool? Like, what if you're a prospective student, and you wanted to go read about it, or just even as a past student, how you'd want to interact with them? What could we put on there?
So what is your goal in terms of what you're trying to communicate?
We're trying to get the word out that this school even exists to more prospective students
Okay.
like yourself, so that they can get a lot bigger pool of people applying to be in the iSchool, because people just don't know it exists.
Yeah, that is a big problem. That was the case when I applied also, and I didn't know it existed for a long time. I actually applied once, applied a second time, and then I applied to the iSchool, and I didn't even know this department existed on campus. So that's absolutely right, and I think there is some really interesting work that happens in the School of Information, and apart from just the experience of what the iSchool is, I, as a student back then, I think would have found what I would have found useful is examples of work and projects that have happened, because that's easier to relate to, in the sense that, hey, wait, that kind of work is what I'm interested in doing. Just in abstract terms, trying to describe what happens at the iSchool, it's really difficult to understand, because by itself describing what happens at the iSchool is difficult, and you try to just, it's hard to just do that in words, but concrete examples of, here is the work that happens, here is the research that happens, here is how that translates to what's happening in the real world, and in every facet of work that happens in the iSchool. That's one of the great things, right? That work is directly applicable in the real world, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of examples of work that happens at the iSchool which is now being used in the real world in some capacity, and highlighting that will let people make that mental connection for, okay, this is something that I see myself doing, or this is something that I find interesting, or this is why maybe I should go to the iSchool, and that may be something that's
No, that's
interesting.
Great.